Thank you, Anna. I'd also like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land where we gather today, both for us here in Meanjin, Brisbane, and also the places where you are watching from. I extend my respect to elders past, present, and emerging. So good morning. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. My name is Louise Mayhew. I'm an art historian. And this morning for our Confronting Contemporary Art, it's a very special pleasure to be joined by the open studio artist here at Queensland Art Gallery, Sebastian Moody.
Thank you.
Sebastian is an artist who places strange things in galleries and art in strange places. Good morning, Sebastian.
Good morning. Wonderful to be here. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
So Sebastian's practice follows in the footsteps of Fluxus, which was perhaps the world's strangest, most expansive, most international, and possibly most joyful art movement. Today we'll be exploring how everyday actions and everyday objects were transformed into art, both by Fluxus artists in the second half of the 20th century and all the way through to contemporary art made today. And we're going to start our first poll with one of these works on the screen by Sebastian. The more I think about it, the bigger it gets. For those of us who live in Brisbane and who drive in Brisbane, this might be a familiar work. It's located at one end of the Story Bridge as you drive into the valley. But what on earth is Sebastian talking about? And Anna, let's launch our first poll for your thoughts. What exactly is Sebastian talking about?
Thank you.
And we'll give you a moment to answer that question. So is Sebastian talking about ego, thinking itself, anxiety, or perhaps desire and pleasure? While you do that, just a reminder that we do really love hearing from you. Oh, we already have a wonderful comment from Vanessa who drives past this work every day. So do feel free to use that chat function because we will be looking at it and chatting with you throughout the session. Who else do we have to say hello to? Hi, Jessica. I think that's a familiar name too. I know my parents are watching. Hi, Mum and Dad. Any shout outs you want to make?
Yeah, where are my mum and dad? Maybe you're watching the recording. Maybe it's getting meta like that.
Probably. Okay, Anna, let's reveal our answers. What do we think Sebastian is talking about? And this screen is a little bit far for me to see, but I think our winner so far is thinking, followed closely by anxiety and then pleasure. And Sebastian is going to explain a little bit more about this work in a moment's time. But for now, I'm going to keep you in suspense. To start our conversation, I'm going to introduce us to Fluxus. I can't quite see. That's it. There we are. So beginning in the 1960s, Fluxus was an international and interdisciplinary art movement brimming with stream of consciousness style experimentation, collaboration, and play. It brought together an interdisciplinary suite of creatives, artists, as well as musicians, poets, and more from around the globe. And like all good modernist art movements, at the heart of Fluxus was a manifesto penned by this very interesting figure, George Maciunas. He was a Lithuanian-American poet born to an architect and a dancer. So we have a sense of this kind of incredible creative juices running through his family. He studied art, graphic design, architecture, and art history over an 11-year period. And he's revered as the founding figure of Fluxus, as well as the key organizer of Fluxus happenings, where all the fun unfolded. In black and white, photocopied font, the manifesto sets out definitions of flux. Flux indicates a copious flowing, a state of movement and change, as well as a commitment to flushing away or letting go through discharge. In turn, Fluxus heralded a non-stop rush of creative activity and a vigilant commitment to discharging traditional art values. And what I mean here when I say traditional art values is ideas such as art being precious, it being an original one-off, it taking skill to create, and it being destined for gallery walls. By using these dictionary definitions, Maciunas honors Dada. Decades earlier, Dada artists had proclaimed to find their name by launching a knife at a dictionary. Indeed, early modernist rhetoric infuses much of this text with its references to anti-art and revolutionary zeal. There are allusions to futurism, suprematism, and constructivism when Maciunas proclaims that Fluxus will rally against the world of bourgeois sickness, intellectual, professional, and commercialized culture, with Fluxus promising to purge the world of dead art, imitation, artificial art, and abstract art, replacing it with a new living art to be grasped by all people. And as we move through today's conversation, we'll explore more about what they meant by this dead and living art for everyday people. Fluxus continues the deep philosophizing, radical politics, and destructive tendencies of their predecessors. But what sets them apart is a humor, whimsy, and even optimism. And we'll be exploring this in their work. The piece I want to draw your attention to here is the second one on the left-hand side, the artwork, Make a Salad. This is the artwork, those three simple words on the page. Fluxus pieces were often disarmingly simple. Like this work by Alison Knowles, they commonly took the form of straightforward instructions. So simple indeed that you might wonder, how can this be art? Alison Knowles was a painter until she began associating with the Fluxus artists in New York. Conversations about her daily routines prompted her to start making Fluxus-style artworks, such as when she hosted a lunchtime art. For the identical lunch, she invited her friends to a diner to eat the same thing that she ate every day, a tuna fish sandwich and a cup of soup. There isn't really any skill in these works. They don't take long to conceive or create. Instead, there's a movement away from making in the artist's studio, away from traditional art skills, and away from the pristine white spaces of galleries towards everyday objects and everyday actions. In Knowles' simple and accessible directive to make a salad, we find familiarity. And it was Sebastian who helped me to think about this work in terms of a tendency articulated by Lucy Lippard, who says that works like these exemplify a tendency in modernist art toward dematerialization. Said more simply, the physical or material artwork slowly disappeared from art around this time as ideas came to the fore. There is no salad, but we can conjure one into being because we're all familiar with the process of washing a lettuce or chopping a tomato. And there's a changed relationship at play here between the artist, the artwork, and the audience, with Knowles inviting us to complete the work in the same friendly manner that someone might ask you to bring a salad to a barbecue. In this new configuration, the artist and the artwork is no more special, no more skilled, and no more revered than us. They're simply everyday people doing everyday things. And we'll return to the philosophy behind this line of thought at the end of our conversation. For now, I want you to draw your attention to what we do see when we look at this work: text on a page. And Sebastian continues working with text in his work. And now I'm going to let Sebastian reveal his answer for us in the context of this text piece. Over to you, Sebastian.
Thanks, Louise. That was a brilliant introduction. Well, first, I just want to say thanks for doing the poll, because I've always wanted to know what this work is about. I think really it's not about anything. I mean, it's about all of those things. It's really, to me, it was always a testament to mental energy. So, you know, it doesn't have an answer. It's something for you to, or the viewer to, you know, use as a tool to work out what's already going on within their own minds. And in a way, I think that's why it's become a really successful work, is because everyone feels like they can own the work. And it has nothing to do with me, really. It's all about you.
Yeah, and for those of us who live in Brisbane and who know this work, it's also it's located around a corner. So it kind of catches you by, I used to live 2 blocks from this work, but it always kind of caught me by surprise every time I encountered it anew. Yeah,
and there's no pedestrian access to it either. So when you drive past it, you mainly see it when you're a passenger, or if you're driving really briefly as well. So yeah, it's really, you know, it is just like a passing thought or a passing mention that you get once a day.
Yeah, this really enjoyable artwork that kind of appears in our lives and disappears again. And you've also shared with us, is that an Alison Knowles artwork? Yeah,
that's right. So part of the open studio here is I curated a little selection of the Fluxus works in the collection. And yeah, she's definitely a really brilliant artist. And I think for me, the appeal of text art is that it's a great stand-in for the immaterial. So, you know, someone said to me once, which I think may be true, is that we think in words. And so by having by writing something, people have to go into their mind to have a look at it. It's not a physical thing, even though it's, you know, painted in red letters on a wall. This text is quite simple. It's not a fancy font. I think it's Arial thin or something like that. So the message is really, you know, what you're trying to get, and which you get through the make a salad is this handwritten kind of little note. And then what you do with it is you've already made the salad in your mind. You're kind of asking, well, how is this art? And then, of course, you can go and make a salad as well, which is, I think she has upscaled. This is sort of the legacy of Fluxus that we'll probably get to in a little bit.
Yeah, the way that you've spoken about it reminds me of this saying I once heard, that when there's text in art, you can't help but read it.
Yep.
You know, you can never not see it as text. And it's kind of like this hijacking into your brain.
Yeah, it's like I was trying to watch a film last night, and my housemate's Spanish, so he has the closed captions permanently on, and you can't watch a film anymore because everything is, your eyes are just drawn all the time to the text. And I think that's because, we associate text with truth as well. And so we're wanting, art is often, one of the wonderful things about art is it is open-ended. But then there's, the didactic panel that we go to is like, oh, here's the authority. I want to know what's the artist was actually thinking, what's actually going on. So I think, it's a bit cheeky like that text. You can kind of, and, it's authority, the written word is authority. So, and that's what's fun about the make a salad. It's just so silly, so stupid. And but yeah, it sort of has this, this false kind of air of grandiosity to it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sebastian. Oh, and we have a question. How did the location come about for this work, Seb?
Well, I used to work in a program called Living Cities used to work with high school students from around the greater Brisbane area, and we would look at a site that the Brisbane City Council was going to develop, and we would do some workshops and we would come up with some hypothetical things. And then this year was the 150th birthday of Queensland, and so there was some funding that the Brisbane City Council had to actually, there's a little park around the corner called Kemp Place, and so there's a couple of other artworks in that park as well, and then this one ended up being on the bridge. So we actually got to, through some money from, I think, the state government, we got to actually make the artwork. So there you go.
Awesome.
Mystery solved.
So if you were worried for any moment of time that Fluxus was just text, let me reassure you with this tiny sprinkling of photographs of the quite wild, raucous, perplexing and communal nature of the movement. And I want you to just take a moment with these photographs before we launch our next poll. So we have a very organized performance of some kind with well-dressed men and women, and I believe that they're unrolling a poem. Moving clockwise, we see two women in Carolee Schneeman's Meet Joy, caught in a rather heightened moment of ecstasy, their bodies mingling with others. Next, we see Namjoon Pike and Charlotte Moorman posed for a collaborative performance with a robot. In the middle at the bottom, a crowd gathers around Mieko Shiomi, watching as she slowly disappears, a smile from her face. And finally, three figures walk through a park, trailing one shoe each on a string behind them. So what on earth is going on here? And where would you rather be? And Anna, let's launch our second poll. So we might choose amongst this chaos to eat a salad. We might join the shoe walkers, ride about with some friends, or maybe we'll hang out in the audience watching a Fluxus performance. And while we wait for your answers to come in, I'm going to throw to you, Sebastian. Where would you rather be? What Fluxus event do you wish you were at?
Look, let me just have a look again. I'd like to go back and see some of the original Fluxus performances. I'm not very good cook, so I don't know about making a salad, but probably the shoe. I'll take the shoe for the walk.
I thought you might choose the shoe. Got a bit of fondness for the shoe. I'll be honest, I'm all for Carolee Schneeman's Meet Joy. I want some coordinated writhing. It looks like they had a really good time.
Yeah.
Anna, let's reveal our answers.
This one.
And the winner is taking a shoe for a walk. You're a man of the people, Sebastian.
We can all go together.
So in these works, we witness Fluxus staging of artworks for audiences and themselves. We see an interest in their experimental collaboration between tradition and technology, as well as what's phrased as a comic disruption of everyday life. And what I really want to highlight here is the social component of Fluxus. Fluxus bridged the social soirees of surrealism, when gathers used to gather in each other's houses to play parlor games, and the more recent staging of convivial micro-communities inherent to the relational aesthetics of the late 1990s. In between these two historical moments, Fluxus moved easily between the home, the gallery, and everyday public spaces, bringing friendship and fun. Keep on losing the bit where Here we are. So Alison Knowles' work, Make a Salad, is a text piece, but it's also a performance, a rather scaled up performance, as Sebastian says. Knowles explains, for me, a piece is not really living unless it's presented. And here she returns us to this idea articulated in the Fluxus manifesto, that Fluxus is living art. What they mean by this is art that breathes outside gallery archives and exists beyond gallery walls. It's art that appears in conversations, actions, and ideas. It exists in the doing. And really importantly, it exists in the doing with others. Knowles originally performed this work in 1962 at London's Institute of Contemporary Art, rhythmically chopping in time with live music. In this live iteration, Make a Salad is a theatrical prompt and a musical score. It's a visual performance and an auditory event that combines music with the tastes and smells and sounds of the kitchen. And of course, you might have noticed that these photographs are in color, which marks them closer in time to us than 1962. Knowles has continued to make grand salads in public spaces. And you can just imagine the thrill and the spectacle of her tossing these mammoth salads in front of quite large audiences. When the salad is made, Knowles then shares her collectively created meal with her audience for eating. And in turn, the salad, like Mieko Shiomi's smile, disappears. There's an anti-capitalist streak here as Fluxus artists let go of objects and commodities in favor of relationships and time spent together. And it's this social aspect of Fluxus that also links us to Sebastian's next work.
Oh.
What's happening here, Sebastian?
So this is a work, it's a few years old now. So the work is called First of All, Last of All. And you can see, basically, it was a surprise. So no one knew what they were coming in for. There was a black curtain. It's quite a small gallery space. And it's actually a bar, a functioning bar. And so I would let a few people through at a time and told them that, okay, tonight you're working in a bar and you have to serve drinks. And I just come back from Japan where when you have a drink, you have a little dish of nuts or some kind of a snack. And then, instructing people to ask for a donation as well. So they work in the room, and then after they'd done that, they're allowed to go and sit on the other side of the L-shaped bar, and then I would let a few more people through. And what was happening was I wanted to give people the feeling of being the main character in the film of their own life. And so I thought, how do I do that? And this is everyone will be focused on them. And so some people absolutely loved it. They didn't want to return from the other side of the bar. They loved having that power, that authority, that attention on them. And other people were absolutely horrified. They needed their hand held and they couldn't deal with it at all. But and so it was some kind of a social contract, and it was to do with power and that kind of thing as well. And so, but what was interesting was that as a kind of a social sculpture, the patron side of the bar just kept getting bigger as the exhibition went on. But everyone who'd sat on that side had done the serving, so everyone had kind of gone through that experience. So it was interesting as well to then watch how other people were going to treat the other people inside the bar, whether they were going to screw with them or whether they were going to be really kind and help them and that kind of stuff. So it was quite a successful experiment to watch all these people kind of have to go through something that they had no idea of what they were getting into to begin with.
Yeah, so it's got a lot of these kind of elements of Fluxus. It's got the kind of surprise element. Yeah. There's often a little bit of a twist or an unexpected shock that's not kind of aggressive, but is quite playful in Fluxus work.
Definitely, I think, and it was a political movement, but I think that part of the way that they used humor was really important. And so this work was, as I touched on just briefly, like it's really trying to look at sort of power relations of like, well, who has the right, do we expect everyone to serve for us all the time? What are we kind of giving back? But in this way, it's a bar. So everyone's, it was a Friday night show. So everyone's finished work for the week, having a drink, unwinding. And so it's this way of kind of trying to weave in some kind of political thought with this really fun, absurd, stupid, awesome time for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for raising that, because it was a hyper intellectual movement. These were very learned individuals. There was a lot of reading, a lot of discussion, a lot of political thought that underpinned.
Yeah, totally. And I think if you look at the time, it's it's the early 60s, so there's a lot of change happening across the world. And I think we look back at Fluxus now and you see everything's all these black and white photos and it all looks very austere and like high modernism, but it's really hard to sort of imagine it being fun and stupid and kind of this affront to the seriousness of art. But at the same time, they knew what they were doing. They knew what the joke was. It wasn't just pure stupidity. They definitely had a a cause or a manifesto that they were applying.
Thank you. And let's also just take a moment to see what further comments we've had. So we have a question from Jessica. Are these performances video documented, Sebastian?
Yes. If you go to my Vimeo, there should be a video up there.
Excellent. And I'm also just going to scroll.
We've got one down the bottom.
Thank you, Sebastian. Oh, yes, Sally, I agree. So Sally says, I love the term social sculpture. I thought the same thing when you said it as well, Sebastian. Sally says, is that a term that you coined?
No. It's a term that kind of keeps coming back, though. I think like a lot of these art terms, they disappear for a while and come back. I think Joseph Beuys maybe was social sculpture. I think he might be responsible for that one. And another comment here. I think the cleverest thing is to be foolish. I think that's a really, I think absolutely. And I think that a lot of the Fluxus stuff, which are we going to get into the Zen stuff next?
We are. Oh,
so that's a good, okay, so we'll talk about that in a little bit, but that idea of the fool and the empty mind and that kind of stuff is also a really big part of Fluxus as well.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. A man sits at a piano in a public space. He opens the lid, places his fingers on the keys, and a crowd gathers in anticipation. Anna, let's launch our next poll. How long would you wait for the performance to start? For some of us, it might be no time. We're busy, we've got places to be and things to do. Maybe a minute or two. For some of us, it might be 4 minutes and 33 seconds because we know our art history. And some of us are very generous souls. As long as they took, I'm here for you, artists. Sebastian, how generous are you with artists? How long do you think you would wait?
Oh, look, it would depend on. I'd probably just be looking at my phone, to be honest. So I wouldn't bother me at all, really.
You got time to burn.
Well, I'm addicted to the telephone, so.
That's one way of doing very strange things to time. I'm going to give you a few more seconds and then we'll reveal those answers. First, I wanted to read out this quite lovely quote, which was written for a Fluxus exhibition held here at Queensland Art Gallery in 1993. The wonderful library here holds a copy of this catalogue. Anne Kirkner wrote, Cage made the radical proposal that any sound could be used in music. His compositions often utilized incidental sounds from unconventional sources, the street, domestic, and natural environments, and in doing so rendered distinctions between random noise and melodical music sound irrelevant. Accordingly, it followed that in order for music to exist, the act of listening was all that was required. Anna, let's reveal our answers, see how long we might have waited for. And oh, what a generous audience. You guys are very generous. So our winners are, you're here for us. Thank you. I love to hear that.
They're all on their phones. They're all on their phones. I know what you're doing. I know what you're doing.
And a really good chunk of us would also wait 4 minutes and 33 seconds. So Cage was already a legendary avant-garde musician when Fluxus began. Many Fluxus artists flourished under his tutelage. In earlier works, he played with altering instruments. He would play multiple radios at once, and he would find everyday objects for creating sounds. In this work, Cage makes a theatrical appearance of following tradition. So he's written a score. In various iterations, he either walks on stage or he enters a public arena. He sits at an instrument, but then nothing. He doesn't play. No sound emerges from his piano. As we were saying, Fluxus artists were highly schooled in and knowledgeable of creative traditions. They didn't throw them away completely. Instead, they cleverly tweaked known conventions and formats for heightened shock, surprise, comedy, and whimsy. This work also continues a fascination with nothingness in art history, or by artists sometimes described as a fascination with the void. And we'll be returning to this with one of Sebastian's works. But for now, I want to talk about how this work redirects our attention from the musician at the center of a musical performance to the world and the noises of that world beyond. I want us to all be quiet for a moment, and you can hear them too. Sebastian, what do you hear?
Like the of the air conditioning.
The ambient hum of an air conditioner.
Yeah.
I did this yesterday as well while I was reading over my notes. Sitting in my home office, and I heard footsteps, a plane overhead, quite loud birds. I could hear the wind. My house was full of tradies, so I could hear all of them talking and banging. And then I even caught the wind in the trees. Please share with us whatever you heard at home. What we hear in these moments has been evocatively described as found sound. So John Cage sets the scene and then in his own words, welcomes whatever comes next. And this kind of openness to chance also plays out in many of Sebastian's works. Sebastian, can you tell us about this work?
Yes, so this work is called Seeing. And if you notice, it's a 6-letter word. All of these words that you see here are as a collection of 6-letter words. It's a projection on the Judith Wright Centre on Brunswick Street in the Fortitude Valley. And basically, I was commissioned to make a work for this building and the launch of a gallery downstairs. And I was having a bit of trouble thinking about what to do. And I noticed that there were kind of these 6 panels to play with. And so I just started collecting 6-letter words and built a database of an Excel spreadsheet of, I think it was about 180 words at that time. And then I thought, oh, they started to make sense as I was looking at them, and they started to sort of form these little stories. And then I tried to swap them around to put them in an order to make a longer story, and it was just didn't seem to work properly. So ultimately, what we decided to do in the end was we just hit random, and then we left it. And then that's been the work, and then that ended up being the work. And again, with a public artwork on a major kind of road, is that when you're driving past it, I think the whole thing goes for about 40 minutes, but I don't ever expect anyone to wait around, talking about waiting around for artwork. So it's more like people are only going to get a few words a day. And so if you live in the area, you're going to get a different word every day, unless you're there at exactly the same second of every day. And I like how they kind of come together to form something in your mind, and then they fall apart again and start just being nonsense. And you realize that there's, what's the underlying order of this thing.
So let's do a little chance encounter with this work now.
I would just randomly find a spot to start it.
Let me go back here. Thank you, Anna. And we're gonna play, and we're just gonna find a
Let's
moment.
go. Vega. So, I mean, obviously there's more than 180 6-letter words in the English language. So it was, I guess, trying to have some things that made sense together, trying to have nouns that could be verbs as well.
Yeah, so it's kind of about chance within parameters.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think that there's a big part of the gambling with the Fluxus stuff. Of you can take the work and sort of put it in these different places and different positions. I could have hit that random thing differently the next time, and we get a completely different outcome from the work. So in a way, the responsibility is not with me, the artist. The responsibility is on the viewer to kind of make the meaning themselves. So it's a bit of a dirty trick, and it's like it's a little bit in a way it's a little bit lazy for me because I don't have to assume any responsibility really in terms of like what meaning people are getting out of the work. And so I like that kind of that ease.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess, and this is something that we'll return to in the final work that we talk about today as well. But there's kind of an element of a fortune cookie message.
Yeah, totally.
You know, so this kind of, you know, gift of wisdom that might be rather strange from Sebastian, that might then be some kind of, you know, meaning for interpretation for our day.
Yeah, because the idea with, you know, mention the fortune cookie or the Rorschach test, or the Fluxus artists were really interested in the I Ching, which is the Chinese divination method, or tarot cards or astrology, is that they're just kind of a, you know, sort of a form of psychology in a way. So it's the idea that the answer's already inside you. You already instinctively know what to do. And these are just tools to help you kind of unlock them. And I think that that's sort of part of the humor or the absurdity in works like this, is that you can be relaxed and immediate with it. And so that immediate kind of reaction is kind of, in a way, the most honest reaction, even if it doesn't make any sense. Or you can, but if it makes, you know, you can throw it away, or you can take it really seriously, depending on what kind of mood you're in, depending on what kind of word you walk past. So it doesn't always work. It doesn't have like a specific outcome for it. You know, it has this idea, it's a prompt in a way. Yeah.
Thank you. So let's see. Earlier, I placed Fluxus between data and relational aesthetics. And I want to do a similar kind of historical bookending here, locating Fluxus within a lineage of chance and also found objects. So objects started appearing in art when Pablo Picasso and George Braque collaged paper ephemera into their paintings. But it was the data artist Marcel Duchamp who radically stepped away from making when he proclaimed objects that he had found to be art. And I just wanted to stick with this word found for a moment. Found meant a few things. An object can be found in its original sense if Duchamp went for a wander and found it on the street. An object can be found when we go shopping, in markets and in shops, when we pay for them, but somehow they seem separate from everyday purchases. And finally, objects are often found within our own homes, among the things that we already own. When found indicates seeing something anew with fresh eyes, often through a kind of distance of time. And threading through these scenarios is the significance of serendipity. This was famously articulated by the surrealists as a chance encounter. I want to now kind of bring us into the present with contemporary artist Sophia Hulton, who continues to assemble found objects in her sculptural practice. We see a kind of visual similarity here between her and Duchamp, with her work Forking Paths 7, had to interpret that number for a second, which brings together industrial hooks in a kind of patterning that's quite evocative of complex lace embroidery. But it's her work events with unknown outcome that I really want to highlight here. You might need to get up close to the screen to have a little squiz at these film stills. She explained, I placed various objects, beer crates, a blanket, ball and plastic bag in the park surrounding the last border watchtower, still standing since the German Democratic Republic in Berlin. I secretly videotaped whatever happened to the objects from the vantage point of the tower. And in her small film stills, we can just make out a series of events where passers-by encounter these objects, gather them together, and take them away. In this work, Hulton is reversing the logic of found objects established by Duchamp. Rather than bringing them into the gallery, she takes objects out into the world and she sets the stage for others' chance encounters. Like Cage and like Sebastian, she is setting up a scenario and then welcoming whatever happens next. Of course, she's also filming from a watchtower, a location where guards prevented the free movement of German citizens from east to west. And so within this work, she's also embedding historical and political conversations on surveillance, and raising darker discussions around the idea of fate. So that's the third of our works on chance, and an opportunity to pause here for any questions and comments. From Vanessa, we have, I love the transitions between the words, beautiful and surprising.
Thank you. It's the font was Optician Sans, so it was based on the Snell and I chart, which is the where you get the 20/20 vision, that idea from, and so it was never a full alphabet, but they updated the font a few years ago, and so I've used that font, and that also had an idea of, well, what are you seeing when you see a word, because the word by itself is not a thing. It's the Platonic idea of a chair, for example. So it's, so there was a nice relationship between what you can see or not, and so that fading was like a part of highlighting that effect.
Thanks, Sebastian. Protests and placards are synonymous, and quite interestingly, placards also feature quite often throughout recent art history. For our final poll this morning, I'm going to ask you if you can identify the Fluxus work. Is it Everyone Is So White in galleries, the blank signs, the sign of desperation, or a sign for nowhere? And I'll give you a moment to have some guesses on that one. Sebastian, if I gave you a placard for holding in the street, any thoughts on what you might write?
How much money are you going to give me to endorse something? Yeah, look, cash for comment. I don't know. Look,
Okay, cash up front.
Cash up front, and then my values need to align with whatever you want to say, and then we can work out if that's going to work out for the both of us. Which I think is what these artists are playing with the idea of protest and banners and things like that. And we see now with a lot of companies and brands, they take on pretending that they're protesting and using these kinds of things. So the relationship's pretty interlinked. Yes.
Thank you, Anna. Let's reveal our answers. Oh, most of us clever clogs have found the Fluxus artist among the sea of placards, Andre Tot. Here he is. So Andre Tot's Nowhere belongs to his series of Fluxus street actions, like John Cage's 4 minutes 33 and Alan Capral's Shoe Walking. These are mildly absurd performances in public spaces. For Tot, Fluxus actions were a celebration of freedom of movement, freedom of speech, and freedom of creativity after living under the dictatorial regime of Hungary in his childhood. So here we see a kind of revelatory appreciation for being able to be strange in public. It's a kind of joy in the everyday that chimes with a Fluxus attempt to reveal the extraordinary in the ordinary. Today, we might use the kind of language of being mindful or present, or tuning into the small pleasures of everyday life. For Fluxus artists, this line of thinking was inspired by Zen Buddhism. This was an ancient philosophy that sought to eradicate hierarchies of importance. For in Zen, every moment and every action is equally important. Fluxus interpreted this by attempting to erase the distinctions between art and life. Remembering Alison Knowles' salad from the beginning, the daily routine of making a salad could be art because without hierarchies, everything is art and everyone can do it. Other signs in Tot's series read, I'm waiting for nobody, I'm going nowhere, and multiple lines of the number 0. These works also embody an existential angst, an exploration of Samuel Beckett's confusing maxim that nothing is more real than nothing. And Sebastian continues this conversation on nothing in his next work.
Yes, so this is a work called Nothing, Nothing. And really, you know, I've taken up, you can see how it's displayed there where it's, some people suggested it was a bit arrogant, and maybe it is, just to have these two paintings of nothing taking up the whole wall of the gallery. But really it's just a Buddhist joke. It's a one-liner, it's nothing, nothing. So it's like, it's a, you know, what could be more nothing? Well, nothing can be more nothing, you know? So it's that thing of, you know, you can never, nothing, no moment is ever empty. There's, you know, use this striving for purity, or, you know, and the circle is a great, you know, empty or full. I think that's it's two eyes, one's winking maybe. And also there's the Japanese temples, like which were protected by two warriors, and one has the mouth open and one has the mouth closed to represent the O and the M, so the Om noise, which is like the beginning, the first and the last letter of the Sanskrit alphabet, or Alpha and Omega, this kind of thing, and so containing all thought between it. So again, you can go as deep as you want. That's probably not, you know, or you could just not get it at all. I don't really mind.
I just think it needs the articulation. It needs the nothing.
Yeah. Well, you have to do it on the slant because it's got the, yeah, absolutely. The italicized.
The emphasis. And so all of these themes that we have discussed this morning coalesce in your open studio work, which is actually just below where Sebastian and I are sitting right now, the Citrus Lounge. And we're going to close today's conversation with a discussion on this work. Yeah. So Citrus Lounge houses a vending machine that we see on the screen that can generate a 4-word, 6-letter long poem.
Did you get that?
Large mirrors have a space where audience members can reflect on those words. In the center of the room, just out of shot, is this quite wonderful lounge space. And then floating overhead is this ambient elevator music that Sebastian commissioned DJ Relax to make for the space. So here we're seeing all of these hallmarks of Fluxus: concrete poetry, chants, collaboration, and this nod to spirituality that's kind of updated into the language of mindfulness
Yes.
and well-being.
Yeah.
Sebastian, you also had this wonderful opportunity to do a bit of a deep dive on Fluxus as part of putting the open studio together. So I was just wondering if you could maybe finish out today by telling us about maybe any kind of hidden stories or traits that have influenced that work.
Yeah, so the project from the outset of the Open Studio, the idea for the Open Studio, as I was working with the learning team here at QAGOMA, is to look at how an artist works. So this, the Citrus Lounge, the mind-body activity within it is an attempt to kind of give people an idea of what it's like. If you're a conceptual artist, then your studio is your head. So it's sort of like what's it like being inside conceptual artist's head, and looking, and then also kind of going back, well, what has influenced my practice? And obviously Flux has been a major part of that. So going back and curating a little section of the QAGOMA Collection and the wonderful Fluxus arts that we've got here, and just trying to sort of take those works and sort of see, well, okay, Fluxus occurred quite a long time ago. What would it look like in 2022? And you mentioned that idea of wellness and wellness culture. And I think, the influence of Buddhism and kind of this flowing and the chants, it's a big part of Fluxus, has sort of been co-opted by what I call spiritual capitalism, which is what is occurring today. And so it has kind of gone for an aesthetic of being like a yoga studio, or sort of like the foyer of a corporate wellness resort with the music and this activity that you can kind of do to clear your mind. So I'm almost trying to have it both ways of trying to be critical of this kind of thinking, but then also, I understand that it's like really meaningful and useful as well. So, yeah.
Tricky line to
It's a
toe.
tricky line to toe,
But
yes.
very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Anna did mention that this work is on show for 2 more weeks. So for those of you in Brisbane, do check it out. And I think we also have some closing comments from Anna. While Anna pops over, questions from Vanessa. With nothing is the one on the right italicized?
Yes, and it's Times New Roman as well, where I just chose the most obvious basic font because I didn't want to confuse people. Well, you wanted people to know that it's a 0, so you don't choose anything too fancy.
From Dan, we have Sebastian. I really liked your t-shirt and wanted to buy one.
Thanks, Dan. They're all gone. I think we made about 30 of them, and they were all screen printed. We may do another run at some point, but yeah, unfortunately, that was just a really small run a few years ago. And
finally, from Chelsea, hey Chelsea, we have Sebastian. Are the symbols on the floor a way of immersing the audience into your studio or head, or do they represent something else?
Part of this is part of the randomization of things. So if you imagine the floor, it's all designed in Microsoft Word. So it has a template on the floor where you can either assign a value or leave a value out. And so it's just a random sprinkling of just sort of, just expression on a keyboard, on a word processor. And as a text artist, I'm not really, thought of as a painter, or so this kind of, and I like the idea that the tool in which that's made is like a really simple, obvious thing that we all use every day, which is a keyboard and a word processor. And so that, anyone can kind of have a go at doing these things. Yeah.
Thanks, Sebastian.